Have you ever considered that apartment life may be more than simply loud parties? Until I learned the reality about what was happening outside the walls of my apartment, I assumed that my neighbors were only complaining about the noise. My wife was having an affair with two other men, and I found out because they were spending the nights at my apartment. When I learned, I was astonished, but I made the decision to learn more and try to answer the riddle. I'll share this tale with you today, along with how I learned the reality of what was happening in my flat. Jaeger met Christina when he was already 33 years old. His eyes were drawn from the start to a gorgeous but slender, sickly-looking girl, out of sympathy and a desire to assist, and when they subsequently communicated and corresponded a bit, he understood he had fallen in love. Since Igor was in the military and frequently traveling, they kept in touch with Christina via social media. Christina worked as a social worker taking care of the elderly. Almost every night, they would communicate through video chat, exchange the latest events, express their opinions, and even get a little wicked. Jaeger said, "I'll be there soon and I'll kiss you." He sincerely missed Christina, and it had been 3 months since their last encounter. She said with a smile, "I can't wait," and Jaeger felt warm within. Jaeger was eager to pop the question to his lover, while he was in town after seeing her upon his arrival. At the conclusion of the evening, he presented Christina a ring. He had planned a lovely celebratory supper for her at his house. She readily agreed without hesitation. Even before he could take the ring out of his pocket, he assumed she had said yes. He had a very simple wedding, brought his new bride into his flat, and then went once again for work. Christina felt miserable and lonely. She didn't fully appreciate the impact of her husband's presence in her life from phone calls and regular networking. One day, a friend extended an invitation to her for a stimulating game, assuring her wonderful company and a fun evening. Christina happily concurred. She greeted her squad after arriving at the designated location and time. There were 5 other males on the squad in addition to Christina. All of them, with the exception of Christine, attended university together and had a strong friendship. Christina requested that her buddy invite her more frequently since she enjoyed the game. She so kept herself occupied till Igor showed up. Christine abandoned the game when he was at home. She vowed to come back when Igor was gone, so the rest of the squad accepted it with grace. And that's what occurred. When Christina came back to the game that evening for the first time following the break, their team won. So they made plans to celebrate in the cafe. They stayed there until closing, and at that point everyone in the group was inebriated. One of the males, Boris, followed Christina when it came time to depart. He had been openly flirting with her for a while, but this evening he became more daring and even kissed her. Christina phoned the man to her vacant apartment once the booze in her blood completed its job. They awoke in the same bed the next morning. Later, Boris visited her a few more times, which expertly made her lonely evenings more bearable. When Igor saw little bruises on his wife during their intimate moments, he became suspicious that something was wrong. When he inquired about their origin, Christina nervously stated that she had purchased them while attending a dancing lesson with a friend. They never brought up the topic again once Igor's vigilance was satisfied by the response. Later, Christina started having extramarital romances with 2 other members of their team in addition to Boris. When a neighbor stopped her on the stairs one day and threatened to tell Jaeger everything, she did not hesitate to bring them to her home. She first banned the trio from visiting her home, but when summer arrived, the watchful neighbor moved in with the cottage and Christina took over the old house. She twiddled her thumb at her temple and used foul language as she informed her buddy about Christina. Their interaction and participation in games came to a stop after that. Jaeger frequently saw the displeased looks of his neighbors while he was walking home. He was told by a married couple who lived directly above Jaeger and Christina's flat, and who had just had a kid, that their intimacy with his wife was particularly noisy and turbulent. He learned from them that Jaeger wasn't the only one who heard the groans. "Our apartment's groaning has drawn complaints from our neighbors. What are your thoughts about that?" That evening, he harshly questioned his wife. She was ashamed and said that she occasionally viewed intriguing films without her spouse. So to say, she did it to de-stress and raise her husband's expectations for his business trip. These comments stirred Jaeger and he took Christina at her word. Autumn arrived. All of the city's roadways were covered with colorful leaves that had fallen from the trees. Jaeger eagerly anticipated his approaching holiday during the final days of his business trip. In order to surprise his wife, he booked a luxurious hotel stay and paid for a trip to the beach. That in mind, he made his way back home. Outside his home, he encountered Grigory Ilyich, a neighbor who had previously threatened to reveal Christina as he got out of the taxi. His expression was grave. He didn't even give Jaeger his customary greeting smile. He was greeted coldly by the neighbor, who then probed Jaeger for a while. Jaeger was surprised when the man entered the room from a distance and said, "Your wife doesn't waste any time. She's got men coming over, 3 of them." He began by talking about his life and his wife. His back collapsed as his pulse suddenly spiked. He regarded Grigory Ilyich as though he had just spoken the silliest thing possible. However, he could see by the man's entire demeanor that he was not lying. After saying thanks for the information to his neighbor, the latter yelled after him for Jaeger to make an adult introduction. The spouse then finished piecing everything together in his mind. The neighbors complained of the haymakers on his wife's body and the groans. Everything was apparent. Jaeger himself simply didn't see it, and Ilyich didn't want to either. Christina was meant to be in her house. When his train came, Jaeger contacted her from the train station. She gave him a warm hug and a grin as she welcomed him. When she saw her spouse was acting strangely, she kindly inquired as to what was happening. Jaeger fixed his gaze unblinkingly on his wife. He was unexpectedly confronted with an unloved lady from a weird, unpleasant woman who he had been dreaming about. He even had the impression that his wife smelled foreign and odd. Grigory Ilyich was seen. As Igor started, he saw Christina stumble and grip the door jamb. "I was told something fascinating here." Christina's lips were trembling as she regarded him with fear. She became even pallid as Jaeger spoke. Christina sobbed irately to the ground, her hands covering her face. She did not contest the truth. She didn't hide anything. She just gave Jaeger the truth. He listened to her while he sat on a seat in the hallway. He abruptly said, "I'm going to sell the apartment." Christina cried even more when she said, "I can't live here after this. It's disgusting." She begged her husband to forgive her, but he simply shook his head and said sorry. Jaeger wasn't dishonest. The very following day, he listed the flat for sale, and because he purposefully priced it low, purchasers came forward swiftly. He moved and divorced throughout his whole trip. On the other side, Christina went back to her mother. She couldn't even afford to rent an apartment on her wages as a social worker in a small town. In amazement, her mother sobbed for days. One of the 3 guys she had been hanging out with, Boris, admitted to her that they had battled about whether any of them could make a married lady feel sexually attracted to them. Christina was totally appalled by the news and humiliation she had received. She had foolishly believed that she liked the 3 of them simply. Christina sobbed and pondered about the whole thing for a while. She had lost touch with that business. She also lacked the time to look for a replacement. She made an effort to secure a part-time position, so she could leave her mother's home. But she had plenty of time to reflect on how her own treachery had harmed her own life before she went to sleep. It was initially just a game that wasn't meant to have any lasting effects. She was only trying to cheat to see what would happen, but soon she found herself being sucked into a vortex of desire from which she was unable to escape. Today, I'll share with you the tale of a woman who, after initially preparing for a small change, ended herself on the verge of infidelity. For 5 years, Nikita and Dasha had been dating. After being married, they moved into Nikita's parents' old flat, which they later decided to leave to their kid after renting it out for a period. Nikita worked at a car dealership, while Dasha was a dental office administrator. They seldom argued and had a very equal relationship. At this point, Dasha started to exhibit an unexpected aspect to his personality. She used to reassure her husband that she truly enjoyed her job, and that she could make money rather than just sit around the house doing nothing. But suddenly she started to bring up his exhaustion from dealing with people more and more frequently. She occasionally brought up her pals, who their husbands had given the go-ahead for not working because they could support the entire family. Naturally, Nikita understood what she was trying to say. But as of now, he could not see how they could possibly make enough money to support both of them. He was eagerly anticipating an increase in income at work. He had recently met his manager and requested a raise. They promised to give him an answer when they had given it some thought. Nikita was regrettably unimpressed on the day. They planned for another chat with his boss. The employer was informed that it could not reconsider his remuneration at this time. The man arrived home that evening in a bad temper. He still had to share this chat with his wife. She seems more concerned about her husband's choice. Dasha's agitation was as anticipated. She even became irritated at first. She had genuinely depended on her husband's promotion because it moved her closer to a higher level of living, if not a total release from her employment. She blamed her husband for not being persistent for a long period that day, and she remained silent the remainder of the evening. About a week has gone. The wife informed Nikita one day that she had chosen to take on additional shifts this month after letting some of her anger and complaints go. The couple was set to go on a vacation. For a very long time, she had wanted to get herself a new phone. The moment was right to increase income. The husband merely noted his wife's statements rather than engaging in an argument. And you can clearly see from them that you haven't given me any gifts. The man even started considering how much cash he would need to save up for a new phone as a present and when he would need to do it. The suggestion was understood. I had added extra shifts at my clinic a month earlier, but the shift worker still hadn't returned from vacation. My husband occasionally wanted to inquire about her colleague, but he usually arrived in the evening exhausted, and the thought entirely escaped his head. Nikita got up early one weekend. Dasha had departed for the shift and was no longer at home. He made a leisurely trip to the kitchen to prepare himself a cup of coffee, but was interrupted by an unexpected phone call. Alexander, a good friend of his, called. "Hello, are you up yet? Come on over," he said with concern in his voice. Something serious, most likely. At this time, Nikita couldn't recall Sasha taking him anyplace. As Nikita hadn't even had time to eat at home before they met, he had just ordered himself breakfast as they entered the cafe. "Remember our Grishka then?" His companion was introduced. "He recently went to play Souvenir, and as you are aware, this pleasure is not inexpensive. Can the man, however, afford it? He owns a number of hotels." Nikita responded. "Why did you call me to discuss having new teeth?" He chuckled. "How do I to inform you? He visited the clinic where your Dasha works, and that's the problem." She recordedly retained his number after the meeting and began messaging him from her own number. He made the decision to boast to me about how a clinic beauty was making advances toward him. I was immediately aware when I learned the dentist's name. At the same time, Nikita's appetite disappeared. He gently inquired as to the precise subject of his wife's letters to their common buddy. He informed him that she had been begging to meet him and openly flirting with him. They had even briefly crossed paths once, but it was simply for conversation and nothing more. But it was obvious that she had big aspirations. Grisha's phone number was requested by Nikita, who then called him that day. He spoke about the circumstance and inquired further about their encounter. She had, in fact, seen him on the day she was meant to have an additional shift. In other words, it's possible that her boyfriend didn't take a vacation. Dasha merely created an excuse for herself so she could meet other men without risk. In exchange for one of her additional shifts, the husband asked his acquaintance to set him up with Dasha. Moreover, just to be clear, this is a true love date, potentially with a continuation rather than merely a get-together to speak. And he will plan the continuation on his own. When Grigory realized he had been flirting with his old friend's wife, he was initially ashamed and did not even want to take part in the whole thing. But after some consideration, he came to the conclusion that his friend required assistance in order to surround everything. Grigory and Dasha met on the scheduled day at a restaurant. Additionally, Nikita was nearby on the street. While they were having a pleasant talk, the false lover signaled to his buddy that it was time for his wife, quite simply, started to flirt with him by holding his hand and making suggestions about prolonging the evening. Nikita entered the establishment and moved swiftly toward their table. Not even enough time for Dasha to take her fingers away. "What's up, wife? Have you got a roving shift today?" her spouse mockingly inquired. Dasha grew pale as she made a dumbfounded face at her husband, averted her gaze, and made an effort not to meet his eyes. After detailing every interaction they had, Grigory concluded by saying, "And you have seen the rest for yourself." When the husband tried to lift his wife off the table by grabbing her arm, she retreated in terror. I won't touch you, so let's leave. Get your belongings out of the flat and leave right now, her spouse said. Dasha gave no resistance since she knew her marriage was ended. Beginning the next week, Nikita reported to her place of employment to inform the director that their administrator had established a dating group for herself there. When Dasha's shift attendant learned that Dasha's husband had arrived, she informed him that Dasha had done this before. She promptly saved his number when she saw a customer enter with cash, then made an effort to strike up a conversation with him. It appears that she was seeking for a better and wealthier choice. 2 witness testimonies were sufficient. Dasha lost her job at the clinic. She was able to rent a tiny apartment, but because she was out of work, she was unable to renew the lease. She then temporarily moved in with friends while seeking for a new career. She still had a solid list of possible suitors, of course. None of them, however, rushed to respond to the obnoxious woman. Nikita soon started living alone and filed for divorce. And because of the circumstances surrounding his ex-wife, he came to his own views. He then purposefully assessed the mercantilism of his prospective picks for mistresses. Thankfully, his buddy Grisha was now willing to assist him as well. Such a life narrative is given here. What do you think of this circumstance and the character's actions? Let us know in the comments. I appreciate you taking the time to read the entire story. Remember to sign up for the story channel for you. Moreover, be sure you like this video. And by doing that, you will greatly aid in channel promotion. See you soon.